So understand that divorce in Islam is seen as a very serious issue. The marriage contract is sacred. It is a contract in the sight of God to legitimize a relationship between a man and woman. You have become halal for each other through this contract. You don't just end it because you weren't in the mood, or you're not feeling it anymore, or because you were angry, right? No. It's something you have to take time to think about. It's something you need to be serious about. It's something you need to consult people about. You can't just jump right into it. So, number one, never utter a divorce in a state of anger. Never utter a divorce in a state of anger. Specifically for men. Understand this before you even get married. Teach yourself this from before you get married. Train yourself for this from before you get married. That I will never utter these words in a state of anger. Say anything else, but not these words. These are only words you should say after months of contemplation, after months of seeking counseling, of asking elders for advice, when you can't see any other way forward. Only in that situation, calmly, in a civilized manner, you sit with her, you explain to her the situation, and then only you say these words. Never say it in a state of anger. Now I know in some madhabs, saying it in a state of extreme anger doesn't even count, right? But there is a difference of opinion on that. In terms of practical advice, I would say, do not allow these words on your tongue. Learn how to control your tongue so that these words never come on it. Take at least 2 months to think about it. Consult elders, consult experts before making a decision. So, in the heat of the moment, it may feel like a divorce may be the best way forward. But you didn't think about it. You didn't think about the life you've built together. You didn't think about the fact that what you're arguing about is petty and can be resolved. You didn't think about how it affects the children. You didn't think about the good times, because you're in a state of anger. So calm down and think about it. And ask people for advice. Sit with your parents or with an elderly scholar from your community or a marriage counselor. Tell them what's going on. Tell them why you are thinking of a divorce, and be open to the advice. And sometimes the advice might actually be, yes, you need to divorce her. I know there are many situations where I had to advise people accordingly, where a man and woman were married to each other for multiple years and it just wasn't working out, and they just couldn't get over their cultural differences or their sectarian differences or their lifestyle differences. And I'll tell them that it's best for both of you to go your separate ways. And in those cases, alhamdulillah, they got a divorce, both of them are remarried, and both of them are happy now. Sometimes that is the advice. But sometimes the advice is the opposite. Sometimes the advice is, hold on, don't throw away your marriage. This can be resolved. Let someone speak to her, let someone advise her, let's see what the issue is. It's something small, or if it's something that can be fixed or something that can be changed, give it time. Maybe your wife has a bad quality that you feel you can't live with, but if you give her a year to change, she may actually change and the quality may no longer be a part of her. If you actually sit and go for counseling and discuss the issue with each other. So divorce should never be the first thing on your mind. Rather, speak to your elders, seek knowledge from the experts, and only where the advice of even the experts is that yes, the best thing for both of you is to end the marriage, then only in that case do you seriously consider divorcing your spouse. But don't just do it on your own, and don't just do it in an emotional state. Next point, and this is more for the ladies than the men, because unfortunately more women do this than men. Do not utilize the Kofar court system to get money from your spouse. This is haram money and it is a curse on you. So we know in the non-Muslim court system in some countries, they have this way, for example, where a woman takes half of her husband's money, or where he's forced to pay her a certain amount every month for the rest of her life. This is nothing to do with Islam. So understand that if you're going down this route, you are stealing his money in the sight of Allah. And this money will be haram for you. So in the moment, greed may take over your heart and may make you think that this is good. I'm getting money out of this. I'm hurting him. But understand that on the day of judgment, when we are asked about our money and how we earned it, how are you going to answer for this? So fear Allah, don't go anywhere near the kuffar system for this kind of thing. The only time you ever go near their system is if you'll actually have a court marriage and you need to have it dissolved. Then you just do that much. Just do that much. Don't go beyond that. Don't go beyond the bounds of what Allah has allowed. Do not seek money that is haram for you. Remember the verse in Surah At-Talaq where Allah discusses the fiqh of talaq, and then He says that whoever fears Allah, Allah will make for them a way out and provide for them from where they never imagined. And whoever has tawakkul in Allah, Allah is enough for them. So if you are going through a divorce and you are scared about finances, you are scared about how you're going to go forward financially, never turn to haram. Never turn to stealing your spouse's wealth. Tawakkul and taqwa. Fear Allah and trust Allah, and Allah will open doors of halal for you. So be very, very careful. Never go near sources of haram money. And unfortunately, we're hearing more and more cases these days of women who are using the kuffar court system to get money out of their husbands. This money is haram, and it will be a curse on you and a curse on your children, and it will negatively impact you in this world and especially in the akhirah. So fear Allah and do not go near this system. Number 4, a very important etiquette of divorce that people have forgotten in the modern world, and that is, do not expose your ex-spouse's secrets and private matters to the world. Even after divorce, still guard their honor. Even after divorce. So while you are married to someone, you are exposed to the most intimate things about them. Their bad habits, their mistakes, their weaknesses, their most vulnerable times, right? You've literally seen them naked. This is something that you have to protect. This is their honor and dignity. Even after a divorce, you have to protect their honor and dignity in this area for the rest of your life. You do not have the right in Islam to go around bad-mouthing your ex-spouse. Now, the exception would be if someone is coming to you and saying that they're thinking of marrying your ex-spouse, right? And do you have any advice for them? And you know that there's something about your ex-spouse that could ruin that person's life, then you can mention that thing specifically and nothing else. Meaning, for example, if you know you got a divorce because your ex-husband was a drug addict or he was a violent person, and someone seeks your advice about marrying that person, then yes, you can tell them that, listen, I was married to him before, he has a drug addiction problem. Just be aware of that before making your decision. But nothing else. Nothing beyond what they need to know. Do not expose people's secrets. And by the way, you're not allowed to expose anyone's secrets or private matters, even more so your spouse or your ex-spouse. And I've seen this again in the modern world. So many Muslims do this. They get divorced and they're all over social media. They post all of their spouses, private sins and private mistakes and weaknesses, and they completely ruin the reputation of the individual. Fear Allah. Fear Allah. This is a major sin on your part. Someone who does this to their ex-spouse is committing a major sin. They are destroying the honor of a fellow Muslim. Understand that that person is no longer your husband or wife, but they are still Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ said, all of a Muslim is haram for another Muslim. Their wealth, their life, and their honor. We sometimes forget about this third part. Their honor. This is where the word Izzah Academy comes from, Honor Academy. The honor of your fellow Muslims is haram for you to violate. It is haram for you to violate the honor of your fellow Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said it is sufficient as a sin that you humiliate a Muslim brother. That is a sin, to humiliate someone. So understand that this is a major sin on the part of a person. In Islam, when you divorce in a manner that is compassionate, for lack of a better word, right? Where you let go of the person in a way that is dignified. I think that's a better word here. Right? Let go of the person in a way that is dignified. You don't badmouth them, they don't badmouth you. You don't seek revenge on them, they don't seek revenge on you. You both just go your own way, and you both move on with your lives, and you do not do anything to harm the other person. If you'll share children, you will co-parent, right? You will both still be involved in the children's life, but especially do not badmouth your spouse to their own children or to anyone else. right? And that brings us to the last 2 points here on this etiquette of divorce. Never badmouth your spouse to anyone, right? The only time is to save someone from harm. So I already mentioned this, that if you divorce someone because they have a drug addiction problem, or they are violent, or they are addicted to alcohol, or something that's going to hurt the person who's marrying them next, then yes, that person has a right that you tell them that thing specifically, but not anything else. Understand that in Islam, gossip, backbiting, slander, these are all sins. Even if the person is your ex-husband or your ex-wife, it's still a sin. They are still Muslims, and you still have to guard their honor. So don't go around backbiting your ex-husband or your ex-wife. Rather, let them go in a dignified way. Wish the best for them. Move on with your life. Let them move on with their lives. And finally, the one area where I see so many Muslims messing up when it comes to divorce is the rights of children. And it's very sad that people use their children as a pawn in the divorce, as a way of hurting their spouse. Fear Allah. Really, that's all I can say is fear Allah. Never use your children against your ex-spouse. Never poison your children against their own parent. Be civil and be just, and fear Allah regarding the rights of your children and their mother or father. You need to give the children equal access. Now, equal access doesn't mean exact equal time, but they shouldn't feel that they have no access to their father or no access to their mother. Yes, one parent at different points in time would be more in charge, and each madhab has a different way of custody, right? In terms of whether the mother or the father gets custody, there's difference of opinions between the madhabs over who gets custody at which age. But you having custody of the child does not allow you to deny the other parent a role in their life. The other parent can still take them out, can still phone them, can still have a relationship with them, can still parent them, can still spend time with them on special occasions, can still bond with them. This is their right as the father or mother over their own children. You having custody does not mean that you deprive the other person of a relationship with their own child. Fear Allah and be just. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. That if the other person had custody, what would you want out of it? You would want them to still let you speak to the children, visit the children, have a good relationship with the children. So give them the same. Do not use your children as a way of hurting your ex-spouse. Muslims cannot be petty like this with each other. We have to fear Allah in our dealings with all people, including our ex-husband or ex-wife, right? So do not use them as a pawn in the marriage. Do not poison them against the other parent. Whatever problems you had with your ex-husband or ex-wife, never bring your children into it. Don't tell your children your father is like this or your mother is like that. Don't make them hate their parent. Islamically, they still have to respect their mother or father. They still have to obey their mother or father. They still have to have a good relationship with their mother or father. Don't get in the way of that. Do not get in the way of that. You are breaking family ties if you do that. And again, this is a major sin. In this area, people allow emotions to overtake them. And so many people fall into major sins without even realizing it. Do not take your children hostage. Keeping them almost like prisoners so they can't see the other parent. Rather, be just. Again, custody depends on the country you live in, depends on the court system, depends on the specifics and dynamics of the marriage, depends on the madhab you follow. So I'm not going to go into the custody issue. But whoever gets custody, the other person still has the right to have a relationship with their own children and to be respected by their own children. So never get in the way of that. So with that, we come to the end of the section on etiquettes of divorce. Moving forward, some of the contemporary challenges we face as a community related to divorce. Number one, using the Kofar court system. So living in a non-Muslim country, when do you go to the court? And I would say the only time you go to the court is if you have a civil marriage, you have a court registered marriage, and you want that to be annulled. And you just get that much done. That's all, right? Otherwise, it all should be resolved in an Islamic court, which in a non-Muslim land would simply be the local imam or the local ulama body, right? Do things the Islamic way. Do not involve the kuffar in your marriage, in your divorce. Understand that nikah and talaq are things that are legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they have to be done in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or at least in line what Allah has allowed. So never give preference to the ways and opinions and system of the kuffar over that of Allah in something which involves the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is disrespectful to Allah, it is disrespectful to your marriage, and sometimes it could even be a means of taking you out of the fold of Islam if you actually believe that the kuffar system is better and more just than Allah's system. That can take a person out of the fold of Islam. So avoid the kuffar systems and focus on solving it through an Islamic system, right? The only time I would say going to the kuffar system is fine is when you just need to sort out certain paperwork, like making sure that that marriage is annulled in the court. Understand it is haram to use the kuffar system to usurp the wealth of your spouse, whether it's through alimony or through taking half of their money or through some kind of manipulation into getting something of theirs. All of this is not from Islam. Islamically, a man still has to provide for his children, not for his ex-wife. Islamically, a man doesn't have to provide for his ex-wife. Once he's her provider while they are married. Once they are divorced, then it is her father or her brother or her son or her next husband who's going to provide for her, right? But it's not his job to provide for her. So for you to take money from him every month for the next few years, this is stealing, this is usurping his wealth, this is haram money. So fear Allah and stay away from this. The third contemporary challenge is that we have these two extremes in our cultures, right? In some cultures, divorce is so normal that people are like, get married, after 3 weeks, they are not feeling it, get divorced, marry someone else, after 3 weeks, not feeling it, get divorced. I know of people who've been divorced 20 times, right? And, they've been with 20 different women in this way. This is technically not haram, but it's not good either. Not everything that's halal is good for you. This is, very much in that gray border area that you need to avoid, that doubtful area you need to avoid. So we don't want to go to that extreme where divorce is something that's normal, where something that's common, where we find now that someone may have a perfectly decent marriage to a decent spouse, but people tell them you deserve better, and if you get divorced, you can marry this perfect person, and so they get a divorce and find themselves with no proposals, right? Because of being deluded by modern society. Beware of this. This is not a culture we want to grow as Muslims. We want a culture of strong marriages, not a culture of divorce. And now we're seeing even more crazy things with the modern world. We're seeing people having divorce parties and celebrating divorce. Like this is ridiculous. This is taking something makruh, something that's a sign of a failed relationship, and celebrating it. No, this is not Islamic, right? So again, do it with dignity if you have to do it, and make it a last resort. The other extreme is cultures where divorce is completely stigmatized to such an extent that people stay in abusive and difficult relationships for life, even though Islamically they had every right to get out. But there's so much stigma in those cultures to divorce that if that person ever gets divorced, there's no way someone's ever going to propose to them or marry them. So they're kind of like stuck in a marriage that they don't want. This is not an Islamic culture either. If you look at the lifestyle of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they did not divorce easily in a way where, I think I can do better, or, I'm not feeling it today, or we enjoyed 3 weeks, let's just divorce. I mean, there were some who did, but most of them did not. Rather, the normal culture was that people got married and they tried to make the marriage work. If it didn't work out, they got divorced with dignity and then they married someone else. There was no stigma attached to the divorced woman, that this woman is divorced so nobody should marry her, or this man is divorced so nobody should marry him. But really, unfortunately, the stigma in these cultures are more on women than men. At the end of the day, if someone is a righteous person and they are trying to live a good life and they fear Allah and they understand the Islamic roles of the husband and wife, It doesn't matter if they were divorced, right? Still give them a chance when you're looking for a spouse. Because it could be that they learned a lot of beneficial lessons from their previous marriage that will make them an even better spouse today than if they were not in that situation, right? So we don't want to go to the extreme where we stigmatize everyone who's been divorced, because some people are divorced for things that are not their fault. I mean, if someone's spouse was beating them up every day, it's not their fault that they got a divorce. They deserve a second chance in marriage, right? But we don't want to go to the other extreme where people are just divorcing for silly reasons and for no reason, and because they feel like doing so. Rather, we want to treat it as something that is makruh, something that's that you avoid unless you have no alternative. But at the same time, we don't want to look down upon people who are being divorced. Rather, they should be judged for marriage by the same criterion as everybody else, which is on their piety and their role that they want to play in the marriage. So some of the silly reasons we're seeing in modern culture as to why people want to get divorced, right? And I'm seeing some really bizarre things in recent times. So in recent times, we hear people saying things like, oh, I got a divorce because I wanted to focus on myself. I wanted me time. Like, see, if you wanted me time, take an hour of your day to have some tea or coffee or read a book. Why break up an entire marriage and violate a contract that is sacred in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you wanted me time? This is a result of hyper individualism, where a person is so individualistic and so caught up in their own self and their own nafs that they in a way start to worship themselves, that they see their ego as the most important thing in the world. Marriage is give and take. Yes, you need to make time for yourself, but that's like an hour a day or an hour every 2 or 3 days. It's not where you break up an entire marriage so that you can be free and independent and focused on yourself. That's not an Islamic way of thinking about life or about marriage. So beware of this modern trend where people are getting a divorce because they want to focus on themselves. You can't focus on yourself while you are married. It's just a matter of finding balance and finding time, right? And I've seen people end perfectly good marriages over this reason, which I find silly and bizarre. Really, it's silly and it's bizarre and it's childish. It's very childish that a grown person in their 30s or 40s who's married to someone who's fulfilling all their rights says that they want a divorce because they want to be alone and they want to focus on themselves. This has nothing to do with Islam. It's a very un-Islamic mindset, and it stems from hyper-individualism. We are not a hyper-individualistic culture. We are a ummah-centric culture. Do not give preference to your own ego over the rights of others. Likewise, we have people who want a divorce because they want to be independent. So we know in Islam, a woman is under the authority of her husband, right? Some women don't want this. They want to be independent. They want to do what they want, when they want, so they want to get a divorce for this reason. And this is due to the influence of feminism that has tricked women into thinking that happiness comes from being independent. It does not. Happiness comes from pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Happiness comes from having a close relationship with your Creator. And you are more likely to do that in a marriage that is pleasing to Allah than in an independent single life that is focused on your nafs. That you may think that being independent will make you happy, but this is not an Islamic way of looking at life. In Islam, we are not meant to be independent, we are meant to be interdependent. What does interdependent mean? It means, yeah, I can take care of myself, but I rely on my wife for certain things. I rely on my community for certain things. I rely on my customers for certain things. I rely on my children for certain things, and that's fine. And they rely on me for certain things. That technically we all have the capability of taking care of ourselves, but we don't, because we are a community. Learn to value interdependence over independence. Interdependence means that maybe, yes, you have the capabilities of going at it alone. But why should you? We're not meant to be alone. Allah did not create us to be alone, to be lonely creatures living alone and doing everything alone. He created us to be part of families, to be part of societies. So aim for interdependence, not independence. Interdependence means, once again, it means that yes, you have the capabilities to do it alone, but you choose not to because you see the value in people helping each other out. That I provide certain things for my wife that makes her happy, and she provides other things for me that make me happy. And could we provide those things for ourselves? Yes, but we don't need to, right? Because Allah has created a system of interdependence. Understand that the only one who is truly independent is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of Allah's names is Al-Ghani, the independent, the one who depends on nothing and no one. Humans cannot be independent. We depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything, even for our breath, even for our heartbeat, even for our life force. We are always dependent on someone. You may think you're independent. You depend on your customers. You depend on the support of your community. You depend on the love and support of your friends. Nobody is independent. So don't give up a perfectly decent marriage because you've bought into this feminist dream that happiness comes from independence. It does not. Happiness comes from pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you live a life that is pleasing to Allah, He will put barakah in your life. So be very wary of these ideas. Number 3, be careful of this modern idea of the grass being greener on the other side. And what I mean by this is many people who are in perfectly functional, happy, normal marriages, they go online, they go on social media, and they see all of these people who are either happily single or divorced, or people who seem to have much better marriages than them, maybe people who are traveling all the time, or whose spouse is always spoiling them on social media, and they get tricked by this delusion into thinking that, maybe if I was like them, I'd be happier. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I'd be happier alone. Maybe if I divorce this person, I can get an even better husband or even better wife. Fear Allah. If you're married to a decent person who fulfills your rights and is trying their best, make the marriage work. Be content with what Allah has provided you with. Be content with the spouse that Allah has provided you with. Do not throw away a perfectly decent marriage for a pipe dream of I could do better. There are many people who have done that and regretted it. There are many people who threw away a perfectly good spouse thinking they could do better, only to realize what they had was already better for them, and sometimes it's too late to go back to it. Sorry about that. So fear Allah and understand that what Allah has provided you with is best for you. And a lot of these things out there that seem on social media to be better, it's often delusion. Many of these couples, they're putting up this cute, happy marriage type of posts on TikTok and Instagram. Many of them are miserable. They're only showing you one side of the marriage because it makes them famous. Don't look at these famous couples as your model of what a marriage should be. An average marriage is much more mediocre and boring compared to what these couples show. That's not a realistic goal for a marriage to be like what you see on Instagram or TikTok. It's the same with many of these people who are posting about being happily divorced or happily single. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but it doesn't mean you will be. It doesn't mean you should give up a good marriage so that you can be happily divorced. No, you should focus on being happily married. That is better for you. That is the life that Allah wants for us. And this, again, going back to the goals of marriage in Islam, is to make sure that people have halal relationships. Why would you give up a perfectly decent halal relationship to be alone? You're giving up that which is better for that which is less. So I'm not saying that those people who are single or divorced are not happy. Sometimes people have to find happiness in that situation because it's the only way for them to move forward with their lives. But it doesn't mean other people need to get divorced to be happy, because Allah created your spouse to be your source of happiness. So don't be deluded. Don't be deluded by these modern ideologies, hyper-individualism, feminism, greed, jealousy, the idea that you can always do better. Put this aside. If you have a good spouse, someone who fears Allah, someone who's trying their best, someone who's doing their best to fulfill your rights, somebody who genuinely cares about you, Never throw away that marriage for these petty reasons. It'll always come back to haunt you. There is more harm and more regret in throwing away a good marriage than there is any good in it. Right? It's like Allah gave you a gift and you threw that gift away. That's what it is. It's like Allah gave you a gift and you threw the gift away because you think you can do better.